The horse stood alone at the edge of the field, mane tangled and coat streaked with dust, eyes wild and wary, watching every movement of the townsfolk as they passed by. Children would point from behind fences, their whispers trailing on the wind, while grown men shifted uneasily, giving the animal a wide berth. No one dared approach him. Stories had grown up around the horse, tales of a creature too unpredictable, too fierce to be trusted. Some said he had tossed men like rag dolls, others whispered that he had outrun every rider who had dared mount him. Every rumor added to the fear, until the wild horse became not just an animal, but a symbol of untamed power that no one wanted to confront. The farmer first saw him while tending to the edge of his land, the morning sun cutting through the mist that hung low over the fields. The horse's dark eyes caught his, sharp and calculating, muscles coiled as if ready to bolt at the slightest hint of threat. Most would have turned away, given the distance a wide berth, but the farmer felt something different, a quiet curiosity, a sense that this creature had a story that no one had taken the time to understand. He studied the way the horse shifted its weight, the way his ears twitched at the faintest sound, and he realized that the fear surrounding the animal had nothing to do with malice. This horse was intelligent, cautious, alive in a way that demanded respect. The townsfolk shook their heads at the farmer's interest. "Don't waste your time," one warned. "That horse will throw you the first chance he gets. He's trouble, nothing but trouble." Others muttered about the dangers, about broken bones and lost pride, about the foolishness of trying to tame something that no one else had managed. Yet the farmer did not move away. He walked toward the fence that separated his land from the open field, eyes never leaving the horse, voice soft, carrying a calmness that seemed to reach the animal across the distance. At first the horse didn't respond. He pawed at the dirt, snorted, and flicked his tail with irritation. Every instinct told him to run, to keep the humans at bay, to preserve his freedom at all costs. But the farmer did not advance with whip or rope, did not shout or chase. He knelt at the edge of the fence, hand extended, speaking in low tones, offering no threat, only patience and a steady presence. The wind carried his words, and the horse's ears twitched as if hearing meaning beyond the sound. A flicker of curiosity crossed his sharp gaze, the first hesitation in a lifetime of instinctive flight. The next days passed slowly, the farmer visiting the horse each morning, moving closer little by little. He brought fresh water, offered handfuls of oats, and never demanded more than a glance or a sniff in return. The townsfolk watched with disbelief. "He's wasting his time," they said. "That horse won't change." But the horse was changing, quietly, subtly, in ways only the farmer could see. The tension in the animal's posture began to ease, the rigid coiling of muscles slowly giving way to cautious exploration. Trust was forming, a fragile thread, spun from patience and care, stretched across fear and instinct. One evening, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the fields, the horse allowed the farmer to step closer than ever before. He lowered his head, nostrils quivering, and sniffed the hand held out in peace. The farmer remained still, offering only gentle words and steady presence, never forcing the animal, never imposing control. For the first time, the horse felt that the human was not a threat, that the calm hand and steady voice were a safe harbor in a world full of people who would not understand him. That simple gesture, no more than a sniff, a tentative touch of the nose, was the start of a connection that had eluded the town for years. The farmer noticed subtle changes that others could not see. The way the horse's eyes softened when he approached. The way his hooves paused instead of stamping in warning, the small nod of curiosity as he studied the farmer's movements. Each step forward was cautious, deliberate, and fragile, yet the progress was undeniable, and still the town avoided him. They watched from a distance, exchanging whispers, shaking heads, and warning of disaster waiting just beyond the fence. "He's wild," they said. "He'll turn on him in a heartbeat." But the farmer remained patient, recognizing that understanding a wild spirit required time, care, and observation, not force or fear. At night, the horse would graze near the edge of the field, keeping the farmer in sight but never too close. He sensed the difference between this human and the others, the quiet attention, the lack of aggression. Slowly, the horse began to test boundaries, inching closer, lowering his head toward the water the farmer had set out, sniffing the oats offered with calm hands. Each small act was a negotiation, a silent agreement that this human was different, that this human might be trusted even if just a little. The farmer knew that trust once broken would be impossible to regain, so he moved slowly, with patience as his only tool. Rumors in the town began to shift, curiosity replacing fear. Some watched from a distance as the wild horse allowed the farmer to approach, a small but remarkable gesture. Others scoffed, insisting the horse was merely playing a trick, that any day now he would bolt and shatter the farmer's efforts. Yet the bond continued to grow, subtle and invisible to the casual observer, formed through small acts of patience, care, and understanding. The tension in the field had changed from fear and avoidance to cautious attention, a delicate balance that both human and horse navigated each day. The farmer began to see the intelligence behind the horse's wild behavior. Every movement, every flick of the ears, every pause and snort spoke a language of instinct and awareness. The horse was not merely untamed. He was cautious, calculating, alive in a way that demanded respect. The farmer mirrored this understanding, letting the horse set the pace, offering guidance without pressure, space without threat. It was a silent partnership, forming in the open fields under the watchful eyes of a town that still refused to approach. One afternoon a storm rolled in, dark clouds blotting out the sun, wind whipping the grass into wild waves. The horse became tense, muscles coiled, ears swiveling toward every sound. The farmer approached cautiously, calling in a calm, steady voice. The horse paused, nostrils flaring, eyes bright, then slowly allowed the farmer to step closer, hand outstretched, offering safety in a world suddenly alive with danger. The storm tested the bond, but the trust held. For the first time, the town had proof that fear and wildness could coexist with patience and care, though most remained skeptical, unwilling to risk a closer look. As days turned into weeks, the horse grew more confident. He would graze near the fence while the farmer worked, sometimes allowing a tentative touch, sometimes simply watching with cautious interest. The townsfolk began to take notice, whispers shifting from fear to fascination. "Maybe he's learning to trust," one said quietly. Another shook their head. "It's still a wild animal." "Don't forget that." Yet the progress was undeniable. The horse, once avoided by all, was now showing signs of connection, of recognition, of understanding that not every human was a threat. And still, the story was far from over. The bond between farmer and horse remained fragile, tested by instinct, fear, and the unknown. Each step forward was a victory, each act of trust a breakthrough, but the wild spirit of the horse had not been tamed. It had merely begun to understand that care and patience could be as powerful as fear and avoidance. The townsfolk watched from a distance, holding their breath, waiting for the moment when the horse would either break free or embrace the cautious partnership forming in the open field. The horse's eyes flicked toward the horizon, ears twitching at every sound, muscles rippling with tension and awareness. The farmer's hand rested lightly on the fence, calm and steady, offering a quiet presence. The air was thick with anticipation, the unknown waiting just beyond the edge of the field. The wild horse had begun to trust, but the next move, the first leap beyond cautious curiosity, had not yet been made. And in that tension, the story hung on the brink of transformation, filled with possibility, danger, and the fragile promise that care and patience could bridge the gap between fear and trust. The morning air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet soil and wild grass, as if the land itself held a secret it had yet to reveal. The wild horse shifted uneasily at the edge of the field, nostrils flaring as he watched the farmer moving slowly among the rows of crops, tending to the small tasks that marked the rhythm of life on the land. The townsfolk had begun to watch from afar, murmurs spreading that perhaps the farmer had found a way to reach the untamed animal, but skepticism remained high. No one had forgotten the horse's past, the broken fences, the tossed riders, the stories of teeth and hooves that left men and women shaken. The farmer had not come to prove anyone wrong. Each step toward the horse was measured, each word carefully chosen. spoken softly so that the wind carried reassurance rather than command. The horse had begun to respond, not with submission, but with a quiet acknowledgement that this human moved differently than the others, that there was no sudden movement, no threats, only presence and patience. The subtle change was visible to those who watched closely, the flick of an ear, a paw lifted hesitantly, a sniff in curiosity. Every small act of trust was a victory in itself. By the third week, the farmer had learned more about the horse than anyone else could imagine. He noted the rhythm of his breathing, the way muscles coiled when danger seemed near, and the subtle shifts in weight that indicated readiness to bolt. He observed the intelligence in the animal's eyes, a sharp awareness that demanded respect. This was no ordinary creature. The horse seemed to calculate each action, weighing the potential risk before deciding whether to flee, fight, or investigate. The farmer's patience was tested daily, yet he did not falter, understanding that trust could not be hurried, nor could it be demanded. The townsfolk whispered, some openly mocking the effort, others watching with a hesitant fascination. "He's wasting his time," one man muttered as he passed by the edge of the field. "That horse will throw him the first chance he gets," but the farmer continued, ignoring the voices, focusing instead on subtle gestures, a step closer, a hand extended, a calm word spoken into the wind. The horse began to respond in ways the townsfolk could not yet see, small movements, hesitant but deliberate, that hinted at the slow formation of a bond neither side fully understood yet. One afternoon, clouds rolled in low, and the field grew dim under the weight of a gathering storm. The wind stirred the grass into waves, and distant thunder rumbled across the hills. The wild horse became alert immediately, ears twitching, muscles tensing, tail flicking nervously. The farmer approached carefully, keeping a steady voice, and placed a bucket of water near the edge of the field. The horse eyed it warily, nostrils flaring, body coiled like a spring. The townsfolk watched from behind fences, holding their breath, expecting the inevitable, the horse bolting into the storm, rejecting any attempt at connection. But he did not. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the horse lowered his head toward the water. The farmer remained still, hand resting lightly on the fence, eyes focused, voice calm. The animal sniffed, pawed at the dirt, then sniffed again, testing the gesture. The storm's energy made every movement tense, yet a quiet understanding passed between them. The townsfolk whispered in astonishment, realizing for the first time that perhaps fear alone had kept the horse from trusting anyone. The farmer's patience had created a bridge over years of avoidance, over instinct and rumor, and even the storm could not break it. The horse began to follow the farmer from a safe distance in the evenings, moving through the field with careful observation, occasionally pausing to watch the human work. Each day, the distance closed slightly. The farmer spoke softly as he worked, narrating simple tasks aloud: watering, repairing fences, tending the soil. The horse's ears twitched at each word, eyes bright with attention, yet he never allowed himself to be cornered. It was a delicate balance, a negotiation of trust and space, where one misstep could unravel the fragile connection they had built. The smaller animals of the farm, the chickens, the goats, even the family dog seemed to sense the change in the wild horse as well. The horse's muscles relaxed slightly when passing near the barn, tail flicking less tensely, movement smoother. The farmer took note, understanding that every detail mattered. That observation was the key to understanding the deeper instincts of a creature that had spent his life on the edge of flight and caution. Even the dog, once wary of the horse, began to tolerate his presence at a measured distance, sniffing cautiously but holding no aggression. As the days passed, the wild horse's past became an unspoken shadow over every interaction. The townsfolk remembered the broken fences, the stories of riders thrown, the teeth and hooves that had kept men away. But the farmer saw something else: resilience, intelligence, a capacity for cautious trust. He began to reflect on the lessons this horse could teach, not just about patience, but about understanding, empathy, and the power of gentle guidance. He realized that fear had always been the greatest barrier, more than wildness or stubbornness. Fear in humans and in horses alike created distance, while patience and care created bridges. The horse's curiosity grew, tempered by caution. He began to explore parts of the field he had once avoided, following the farmer's presence while keeping a careful eye on every potential danger. Occasionally he would pause to snort or paw at the ground, testing the boundaries of trust, and the farmer would remain still, voice low, hand steady, offering silent reassurance. Every step forward was a lesson in balance, every small act of confidence earned through careful observation and respect for the animal's instincts. One evening, the horizon burned orange and red as the sun set behind distant hills. The wild horse moved closer than ever before, standing just beyond the fence, eyes bright and attentive. The farmer knelt, hand outstretched, speaking softly, offering no pressure, only presence. The horse hesitated, nostrils flaring, tail flicking in tension, then lowered his head slightly, sniffing the farmer's hand. The townsfolk, watching from behind fences and along the distant road, whispered among themselves, astonished at the slow miracle unfolding before them. A horse once avoided, feared, and whispered about in warnings was now showing the first signs of trust, guided not by force but by care. The farmer noticed subtle details others would miss, the way the horse's ears relaxed, the way his muscles shifted from rigid tension to tentative ease, the faint signs of recognition in his eyes. This was not submission, it was understanding. The horse was learning to distinguish threat from safety, to read intention in ways that humans rarely noticed, and to test the limits of a relationship without risking his instinctual survival. The smaller animals, too, responded. Goats and chickens paused in curiosity rather than flight, sensing the calm authority in the field that had replaced chaos and fear. Nightfall brought a chill, and the wild horse remained close, ears flicking at every sound, yet he stayed. The farmer lit a small lantern, placing it near the fence, the glow illuminating the horse's careful movements. Each step he took was deliberate, measured, aware of the tension in the night, aware of the storm clouds that might roll in, aware of the townsfolk's watchful eyes. He was alive, aware, calculating, but also willing, in his own cautious way, to take the risk of connection. The farmer's hand hovered, not touching yet, offering the silent promise that care, not force, would guide this fragile bond. The town below whispered in astonishment and speculation. "He's really getting close," one woman said quietly. "I can't believe it. After all these years, someone's finally reached him," another shook her head. "Be careful, he's still wild." That caution will turn to flight the first chance he gets, yet the progress was undeniable. Every inch the horse allowed the farmer closer, every quiet moment of attention, was a breakthrough, a testament to patience and understanding. The wild horse moved with deliberate caution, every muscle alive with instinct, yet he remained. The farmer mirrored that careful energy, calm and patient, offering guidance through presence rather than command. The night deepened, shadows stretching, wind rustling through the grass, but the tension remained manageable, controlled, yet still fragile. The horse had not surrendered his wild spirit. He had only begun to recognize that some humans could be different, that some hands could offer safety instead of threat. And so the story lingered on the edge of transformation. The wild horse, once avoided by all, was now beginning a journey of trust and understanding that could reshape his life and the perception of those who had feared him for so long. The farmer's patience, care, and steady presence were building a fragile bridge over years of instinctual fear and human skepticism, and the townsfolk watched with bated breath, unsure whether the next step would solidify the bond or shatter it entirely. The air was thick with possibility, tension, and anticipation, leaving every witness and the horse himself on the brink of a change that no one could yet predict. The days grew longer, the sun climbing high over the fields, casting sharp shadows across the fence lines and patches of wild grass where the horse had learned to roam. The wild horse had become more confident in his movements, yet the tension between instinct and trust remained taut like a stretched rope. Each morning, the farmer would approach slowly, carrying buckets of water and handfuls of oats, speaking in a voice low and steady. The horse watched, muscles coiled, eyes bright and alert, as if measuring every nuance, every hesitation, every intention. The townsfolk watched too, from behind fences, barns, and the dirt roads that crisscrossed the land, whispering both praise and warnings. Some townsfolk were curious, drawn by the slow transformation unfolding in the field. A few children dared to creep closer, though never crossing the threshold of safety, peeking around fence posts and wagging their fingers in excitement. "Look, he's letting him come near," one whispered. Others shook their heads. "Be careful," a man warned, voice low and tense. "That horse isn't tamed. He's too smart, too fast. One wrong move, and you'll see why no one touches him." The tension hung in the air like a storm yet to break, a silent test of courage, patience, and understanding. The farmer began to notice subtle changes in the horse's behavior, moments that might have gone unnoticed by others. The way his tail flicked less sharply, the softening of the ears when the farmer approached, the gentle pawing of dirt in a kind of hesitant rhythm, all small signs of trust forming. But there were setbacks as well. Sometimes the horse would snort suddenly, hoofs pawing the ground, ears pinned back, eyes darting toward a shadow or the sound of a passing cart. Every advance had its counter, every act of trust balanced by instinct and fear. The farmer understood that patience alone was not enough. Observation, respect, and timing were equally critical. A subplot began to unfold with the arrival of a traveling trader who had heard the rumors of the wild horse. He brought with him whispers of opportunity, talking about the horse's strength, speed, and intelligence. "That creature could fetch a good price," he said, eyes gleaming. "He's untamed, yes, but someone like me could train him, ride him, sell him for far more than anyone could imagine." The townsfolk who overheard murmured among themselves, curiosity mixing with doubt. "Maybe they're right," one said, "but who could possibly tame him without paying the price in bruises or broken bones?" The horse reacted to the presence of the trader immediately. He pawed at the ground, nostrils flaring, muscles coiled, ears swiveling to catch every movement. The farmer's hand rested lightly on the fence, voice soft but firm. "Easy, calm. Nothing to fear," he whispered. The horse hesitated, measuring the intentions of the new figure, yet he did not flee. The tension grew, heightened by the unspoken question of whether the horse could differentiate between the threat of the trader and the steady patience of the farmer. It was a delicate balance, one that could tip in an instant, and the eyes of the townsfolk reflected the intensity of the moment. Meanwhile, the farmer continued his subtle work of building trust. He would move slowly around the horse, sometimes stopping to repair the fence, sometimes kneeling at the edge of the field to lay out oats and water. Each gesture was a negotiation, a silent communication of respect and patience. The horse would watch intently, sometimes inching closer, sometimes retreating a step, yet always aware that the farmer offered no harm. The smaller animals of the farm mirrored the tension, their movements cautious, their own instincts tested by the presence of the wild creature. One afternoon, as clouds gathered low and gray over the horizon, the tension reached a subtle peak. The wild horse spotted a coyote moving along the distant ridge. Muscles coiled, ears pinned, tail flicking sharply. He snorted and pawed at the dirt, eyes wide with focus. The farmer approached slowly, voice low, hand raised in a calm gesture. "It's all right. It's just the wind and shadows." The horse hesitated, muscles tense, sensing both danger and reassurance. He did not flee, but the alertness remained, a reminder that trust was earned, fragile, and easily disrupted. The townsfolk watched from a distance, whispers rising with awe and anxiety. "He hasn't run yet," one said. "But it won't last. He's still wild." Even as trust grew, the horse's instinct remained a powerful force. One day, a sudden crack of a falling branch startled him, sending hooves skimming across the field. The farmer froze, hand steady, voice calm, guiding him back with gentle words rather than force. Slowly, the horse paused, breathing heavy, eyes bright and aware, and returned to a cautious distance. The smaller animals scattered briefly, then returned to their rhythm, reflecting the delicate balance that governed the field. Each movement, each reaction reinforced the complexity of the relationship. The townsfolk began to debate the nature of the bond forming in the field. Some were convinced that patience and care had bridged the gap between human and wild spirit, while others warned that danger was inevitable, that no matter how gentle the farmer was, the horse's instincts could turn in an instant. Even the children who had once sneaked close to observe now approached more cautiously, learning through observation that connection with a wild spirit required respect, patience, and an understanding beyond simple fear or excitement. The trader returned one afternoon, bringing with him a rope, a saddle, and tales of expertise in taming wild horses. "I can teach him," he boasted to the townsfolk. "I can ride him, train him, sell him for a profit. He's untamed, yes, but worth far more than anyone imagines." The horse reacted instantly, muscles coiling, nostrils flaring, tail snapping sharply. The farmer stepped forward, voice low and steady, hand extended, offering reassurance. "Easy, calm, nothing to fear." The horse hesitated but did not bolt. The tension between potential control and established trust held the entire field in quiet suspense. Days turned into weeks, and the subtle tension between freedom and guidance became the heart of the story. The wild horse moved more confidently near the farmer, eyes bright with awareness, muscles rippling with controlled energy. He would graze near the fence, sometimes allowing a tentative sniff or glance from the human, but never losing the instinctual caution that had defined his life. Each gesture was a negotiation, a conversation between instinct and trust, a delicate balance that the townsfolk could only watch from afar, awe and apprehension mingling in their voices. Meanwhile, the subplot of the trader's presence created an undercurrent of suspense. He lingered at the edges of the town, watching for any misstep, any sign of weakness that might allow him to claim the horse. The horse sensed his presence immediately, coiling muscles, flicking ears, reacting to the threat with instinctual precision. The farmer, aware of the tension, maintained his calm demeanor, guiding the horse without force, keeping the fragile trust intact. Every step became a lesson in patience, control, and awareness of both animal and human instinct. The nights brought their own tension. The wild horse remained vigilant, ears swiveling at every rustle, muscles ready to spring at any perceived danger. The farmer would sit quietly at the edge of the field, lantern casting soft light, voice low, offering a presence that reassured but never commanded. Even as the storm clouds gathered or the wind swept across the open land, the horse would remain, observing, learning, and testing the limits of trust. Each night was a silent negotiation, a test of patience, courage, and understanding. The townsfolk continued to speculate, some convinced the horse would ultimately reject the farmer's patience, others inspired by the slow transformation. Children pressed against fences, whispering in excitement as the horse inched closer, muscle rippling, tail flicking, nostrils flaring. Adults debated in hushed tones about whether this was proof that patience could overcome fear, or simply a temporary lull before inevitable chaos. The tension was palpable, hanging over the field like a heavy cloud, every breath and step pregnant with potential consequence. Even within the farm, the smaller animals reflected the rising tension and gradual trust. Goats grazed nearby, chickens pecked at the ground, all adjusting their movements according to the horse's presence. The wild horse's instincts remained sharp, yet there were moments of calm, moments where he observed the human, learned the rhythm of the land, and began to navigate the boundaries of a relationship that had long seemed impossible. Every act of cautious trust reinforced the complexity of the bond forming in the open field. And so the story continued, tension building as trust grew, conflict simmering just beneath the surface. The wild horse, intelligent and instinctive, remained a symbol of raw power, yet the patience and care of the farmer offered a pathway to connection that no one else had attempted. The trader lingered at the edges, townsfolk watched with bated breath, and the land itself seemed to hum with anticipation. Every moment held the potential for breakthrough or disaster, every gesture carried weight, and the fragile trust that had begun to form was tested with each passing day. The field became a stage of unspoken negotiations, a battleground of instinct versus patience, fear versus understanding. The wild horse had begun to respond to care, yet his instincts remained untamed, a reminder of the delicate balance that could tip in an instant. The farmer's calm presence, steady hands, and careful observation continued to bridge the gap, guiding without forcing, observing without intrusion. The tension grew with each passing hour, each hesitant movement, each whispered word of caution from the town. And as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, casting long shadows across the fields, the story remained unresolved. The wild horse stood at the edge of the field, ears flicking, muscles rippling with readiness, yet a quiet curiosity held him near. The farmer knelt at the fence, hand extended, voice calm, offering the silent promise that care could create trust. The townsfolk watched from a distance, whispers of disbelief and wonder mixing in the fading light. The trader lingered, silent and calculating, aware that patience and understanding had created an opportunity he could not yet claim. The tension hung heavy in the evening air, the wild horse a symbol of untamed spirit and cautious trust, the farmer a quiet guide, and the townsfolk witnesses to a transformation that none could fully predict. Every step forward was a triumph, every hesitation a reminder of instinct, and every act of care a testament to the power of patience. The story waited on the brink of revelation, the next move uncertain, leaving every observer, human and animal alike, suspended between fear, hope, and anticipation. The morning mist hung low over the fields, curling around the fence posts and the tall wild grass as if guarding the secrets of the land. The wild horse paced near the far edge of the field, ears twitching, nostrils flaring, muscles coiled like springs. The farmer moved cautiously, taking careful steps, his voice calm and steady, yet every fiber of his being was alert to the tension radiating from the horse. Weeks of careful patience had brought them closer than anyone had thought possible, but the balance remained fragile. Every movement was a test, every glance an unspoken negotiation. The townsfolk gathered silently on the ridge beyond the field, eyes wide, hearts tense, whispering in awe and fear. A distant crack of a branch startled a nearby crow, sending it flapping into the sky. The wild horse jerked, hooves stamping, tail flicking sharply. He pivoted on instinct, muscles taut and ready to bolt at any perceived threat. The farmer froze, hand outstretched, voice low and soothing. "Easy, easy now." The horse's sharp eyes flicked between him and the edge of the field, nostrils flaring, body vibrating with a tension that made every onlooker hold their breath. For a moment, it seemed as though all the progress of the past weeks could unravel in an instant. At that moment, the trader appeared on the distant path that cut through the fields, rope in hand, saddle slung over a shoulder, eyes bright with greed and intent. The horse saw him immediately, ears flattening, muscles coiling tighter, a sharp snort rising from deep in his chest. The farmer's heart raced, knowing the presence of the trader could undo everything. He stepped slowly closer, voice calm but firm, hand hovering near the fence, offering the silent reassurance that had worked before, but now with a greater risk. The tension between instinct and trust had never been higher. The townsfolk pressed against the ridge, whispering warnings to one another. "He'll bolt! I told you!" "That horse can't be trusted," another voice countered, quieter, tinged with hope. "No." "Look, he's staying, the farmer. He's earned it." The wild horse pawed at the dirt, tail flicking in agitation, eyes darting from the farmer to the approaching trader. Every instinct screamed danger, yet he hesitated. The air seemed thick with anticipation, the field itself holding its breath as the moment stretched taut. A sudden gust of wind swept across the open land, rustling the grass and bending the trees along the horizon. The wild horse shivered, ears swiveling, nostrils flaring. He backed a step, then a second, muscles tight, ready to launch into flight. The farmer did not move closer, did not force his presence, only spoke softly, a low murmur carried on the wind. "You're safe. Nothing's going to hurt you." The horse's eyes softened slightly, nostrils quivering, yet the shadow of fear remained. The trader drew closer, rope swinging, voice rising in a call meant to entice and command. The horse reacted instinctively, heart pounding, yet something held him, the invisible thread of trust the farmer had woven over weeks of care. The smaller animals of the farm reacted to the tension as well. Chickens scattered briefly, goats raised their heads, alert to every sound, every motion, yet the horse's restraint, cautious and deliberate, seemed to anchor them. Even the wind seemed to carry a warning, rustling through the tall grass with a whisper that echoed the suspended energy of the field. Every creature, every movement, every shadow became part of a living stage where instinct and patience danced a fragile, dangerous rhythm. The trader's voice grew louder, calling out, attempting to draw the horse, to bait him into action. The wild horse's muscles tensed even further, eyes bright, ears flat, tail snapping with tension. He pawed at the ground, nostrils flaring, yet he remained, suspended between flight and trust, between the instinct that had kept him alive and the cautious bond he had begun to form with the farmer. The townsfolk gasped, some moving closer to see, some shaking their heads in disbelief. The suspense was unbearable, each heartbeat carrying the weight of the unknown. The farmer stepped slightly to the side, keeping the hand near the fence, voice low, repeating familiar words of reassurance. "Nothing to fear, calm now." The wild horse's ears twitched, muscles coiling, and for a moment it seemed as though time itself had slowed. The tension rippled outward, touching every creature, every blade of grass, every witness. The horse's wild intelligence measured the risk, weighed the intentions of the trader, and considered the calm presence of the farmer who had never forced, never rushed, never threatened. The field was alive with anticipation, a fragile balance ready to tip with the smallest misstep. Then a sudden movement. One of the children who had crept closer to watch stumbled, sending a small clatter of rocks down the slope. The wild horse jerked violently, ears pinned, muscles rippling with instinctual energy. For a moment, it seemed as though the entire story, the bond painstakingly built over weeks, could shatter in an instant. The farmer froze, hand extended, voice steady, heart racing. "Easy, easy." The horse pawed the ground, nostrils flaring, then paused, breath heaving, eyes darting toward the human who had shown him patience, toward the approaching threat of the trader, toward the chaos that seemed to erupt from every corner. The townsfolk gasped, holding their breath, eyes wide. Some whispered in fear, predicting disaster. Others whispered in hope, believing the bond would hold. The tension was unbearable, the field itself charged with energy, every creature attuned to the precarious balance. The wind gusted again, rustling grass, bending trees, and the trader's shadow loomed closer, rope swaying, confidence radiating from his calculated stride. Every instinct of the wild horse screamed danger, yet the memory of calm, patient care, of steady hands and soft words anchored him, even if just enough to prevent immediate flight. The farmer took a measured step, careful not to startle, eyes locked on the horse, voice low, soft, a promise carried in tone rather than command. "You're safe, trust me." The horse shifted slightly, nostrils flaring, ears flicking back and forth, eyes darting between threat and reassurance. The tension was electric, every muscle ready to spring, every nerve alive with anticipation. The smaller animals of the farm pressed closer to the barn, sensing the stakes, watching the dance of instinct, trust, and potential danger unfold. Clouds darkened further, the day's light dimming, shadows stretching across the field. The wild horse pawed the dirt again, tail flicking sharply, head high, eyes scanning the approaching figure of the trader. The farmer remained calm, hand near the fence, voice gentle, every movement deliberate, offering reassurance without pressure, presence without command. The horse's breathing quickened, muscles coiled tighter. Yet he stayed suspended in the impossible space between trust and fear, instinct and choice. The townsfolk leaned forward, whispers hushed, tension mirrored in every eye. Some clutched the fence, others pressed fingers to lips in disbelief. Even the children held still, breaths shallow, witnessing the unfolding drama. The field had become a stage, the wild horse a protagonist of untamed power, the farmer the guide of patience and care, the trader a looming threat, and every observer held in suspended anticipation, unsure which way the moment would break. The horse pawed once more, nostrils flaring, muscles rippling under the tension, tail snapping. A sharp crack from the rajah branch falling, a loose stone echoed through the field, sending the animal's heart racing. For an instant, everything hung in balance, the culmination of weeks of observation, trust building, and care teetering on the edge. The farmer's voice cut through the chaos, calm, low, deliberate. "Easy, calm, trust me." The horse froze, nostrils quivering, ears flicking, eyes searching, every instinct warning of danger, every memory of patient care urging restraint. The trader stepped closer, rope in hand, confident, unaware of the invisible thread holding the horse in place. The townsfolk gasped, some whispering frantic warnings, some watching silently, tension palpable. The wild horse's muscles coiled, every sinew alive with potential action, eyes flashing between threat and reassurance. Every heartbeat echoing through the quiet field. The storm clouds gathered fully now, wind whipping through the grass, the distant rumble of thunder adding to the suspense, and the field seemed to vibrate with anticipation. The horse pawed again, nostrils flaring, tail flicking sharply. His body was a tight spring, ready to launch, every instinct screaming flight, yet he did not. The farmer's calm presence, soft voice, and steady patience held him at bay, even as the trader's shadow loomed closer. The tension was at its peak, every witness frozen in anticipation, hearts pounding, every second stretched into an eternity. The story had built to the brink, and the next moment could either shatter everything or define a new balance of trust and understanding. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying the scent of rain, dust, and the distant hills. The horse's ears flicked, muscles coiled tighter than ever, eyes bright with alert energy. The farmer knelt slightly, hand hovering, voice calm, steady, a lifeline extended across instinct and fear. The townsfolk leaned forward, children wide-eyed, adults tense, every breath held in silent anticipation. The trader moved again, rope swinging, unaware of the invisible bond that now suspended the wild horse's decision, teetering on the edge of instinct and choice, on the edge of freedom and trust. The wild horse pawed the ground once more, nostrils flaring, tail snapping, ears swiveling. He could bolt at any moment. He could reject every lesson of patience, every act of care, every soft word spoken into the wind. Yet he remained, frozen, tense, aware, his mind balancing threat and reassurance, past fear and present patience, the unknown of the future and the comfort of steady hands. The farmer's eyes held his, voice calm, presence steady. And the field waited, suspended in the unbearable tension of the impossible moment before change. The climax hovered just out of reach, every heartbeat stretching the tension further, every breath of the wind carrying anticipation, every muscle in the wild horse coiled like a spring. The trader's approach, the townsfolk's whispers, the horse's instinct, and the farmer's patient guidance collided in a moment pregnant with possibility. The story teetered on the brink, the outcome unknown, the field alive with suspense, every witness suspended between fear, hope, and the fragile promise of what might come next. The field was hushed, the tall grass swaying uneasily under the pressure of the wind. The wild horse stood at the edge, muscles tight, nostrils flaring, ears swiveling toward every sound. Each movement was calculated, deliberate, and alive with instinct. He sensed the farmer nearby, steady and patient, a constant in a world that had always demanded vigilance. Yet, at the same time, he could smell the trader, carrying rope and promise, moving with an easy confidence born of experience and expectation. The tension between choice and instinct, trust and threat, filled the air like an electric charge, humming through the grass, the fences, and even the distant hills. The farmer approached slowly, careful to let the horse dictate the pace, each step deliberate, quiet, full of reassurance. His voice carried softly across the field, calm, measured, a constant rhythm that the horse could follow if he chose. "It's all right. Nothing to fear." The words seemed to hover in the air, mixing with the scent of rain and earth, blending into the tension like a thread of hope. The horse's muscles twitched, tail flicking sharply, hooves pawing at the dirt, yet he did not bolt. The presence of the farmer anchored him, a fragile tether holding him to a choice that could go either way. The townsfolk had gathered on the ridge, pressing close to one another, whispers of fear and amazement weaving through the crowd. Some clasped hands over mouths, afraid to breathe, worried that any sudden movement might trigger disaster. Others leaned forward with wide eyes, captivated by the impossible patience that had brought a wild horse this close to human connection. Even the children, who had once dared to peek through the fence slats, remained frozen, small hands pressed to the wood, waiting for the inevitable, yet hoping for something extraordinary. The trader moved carefully along the dirt path, rope coiled loosely, saddle slung over a shoulder. His eyes glimmered with anticipation, calculating, predicting, planning. He had dealt with wild horses before, but this one was different. He could sense it in the way the horse held himself, the intelligence in the sharp gaze, the coiled tension that spoke of instinct honed over years of survival. Every step he took sent the horse muscles rippling, ears flattening, tail flicking in agitation. The tension in the field was almost unbearable, a delicate line stretched between instinctual flight and fragile trust. A sudden clap of thunder rolled across the hills, startling the smaller animals. Chickens squawked and scattered, goats raised their heads in alarm, and even the wind seemed to press harder against the field, rattling fence posts and bending the tall grass. The wild horse flinched, hooves pawing sharply, nostrils flaring as adrenaline coursed through his body. His eyes darted between the farmer, steady and calm, and the trader, confident and looming. The townsfolk gasped, whispers rising to murmurs of fear and anticipation. The farmer's voice cut through the tension, low and steady, offering reassurance without command. "Easy, calm, trust." He extended a hand, palm out, a gesture of peace that had worked before, but now carried the weight of weeks of observation, patience, and careful guidance. The horse shifted, muscles coiling tighter, tail snapping, ears flicking, eyes wide and bright. He wanted to flee, to escape, to honor the instincts that had kept him alive for so long, but he hesitated. The memory of soft words, gentle hands, and steady presence anchored him, if only barely. The trader paused, recognizing the silent tension but misjudging it as fear rather than trust. He stepped forward, rope loose but ready, voice rising to try to command attention. "Come on now, just a step closer." The horse's body twitched violently, nostrils flaring, eyes flashing with instinctual intelligence. He pawed at the ground, muscles rippling, tail snapping, and for a moment it seemed as though chaos might erupt at any second. The wind gusted, rustling the grass, scattering dust, carrying every sound across the field in sharp, unpredictable waves. The townsfolk leaned forward, some pressing against the fence, others gripping hands or wooden posts, hearts pounding in unison. They could feel the tension like a physical force pressing down from the ridge, each movement of the horse or human magnified, charged with anticipation. The air seemed to vibrate with potential energy, waiting for the moment when instinct or choice would shatter the fragile balance. The wild horse pawed again, head high, nostrils flaring, muscles trembling with coiled strength. His eyes flicked toward the farmer, seeking reassurance, searching for the familiar presence that had offered calm without force, care without pressure. Then instinct pulled him toward the distant path where the trader waited, rope in hand, expectation in every step. He shifted slightly, hooves pressing into the dirt, ready to leap, and every eye in the field tensed, waiting for the inevitable flight. The farmer stepped lightly forward, careful not to provoke, voice soft, carrying across the charged air. "Easy, nothing to fear." Calm. His hand hovered near the fence, steady, a lifeline in the whirlwind of adrenaline. The horse twitched, nostrils quivering, eyes darting from the human presence to the looming trader, ears flattening in tension. The storm clouds above shifted, sunlight flickering through gaps in gray, wind carrying the scent of earth and rain, and the field seemed suspended in a single heartbeat, poised between chaos and control. A sudden movement, a bird taking flight. A loose stone rolling down the slope set the horse's muscles twitching, tail flicking sharply, hooves pawing at the ground. The tension was unbearable, stretching every nerve, every instinct, every heartbeat to the edge. The townsfolk gasped, children pressed closer, some biting nails, others holding breath, while the farmer remained calm, voice low, hand extended, offering presence without command. The horse paused, nostrils flaring, ears flicking, eyes wide, muscles coiled, and the world seemed to hold its breath with him. The trader advanced slowly, rope swinging, confident, unaware that the invisible bond between horse and farmer had created an anchor stronger than fear alone. The wild horse's body tensed fully, nostrils flaring, eyes sharp, ready to spring at any sign of threat. The farmer spoke again, soft and steady, tone carrying reassurance. "It's all right, nothing to fear." Calm. The horse pawed again, head high, muscles rippling, tail snapping, every instinct screaming flight, yet the memory of patient care held him at bay, if only just enough. Clouds darkened fully now, the wind picking up, rattling the fence, bending the grass in long waves. Thunder rolled distant but deep, adding a weight of anticipation that pressed against every witness. The wild horse pawed sharply, nostrils flaring, tail snapping, ears swiveling, eyes flicking between farmer and trader. His instincts screamed to bolt, to flee, to avoid the danger that had always defined his life. Yet he remained suspended between instinct and trust, between fear and curiosity, every muscle alive, every breath a negotiation. The townsfolk whispered, some holding hands over mouths, some wide-eyed with awe, some murmuring in disbelief. He's still there, after everything. He hasn't run. It's the patience. The care, that human. The field itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Every blade of grass, every fence post, every gust of wind carrying tension, every step and heartbeat magnified in the impossible balance that hung over the land. The wild horse pawed once more, nostrils flaring, tail flicking sharply, hooves pressing into dirt, ears swiveling, eyes bright with awareness. The farmer remained calm, voice steady, hand hovering near the fence, a silent promise of safety. The trader moved again, rope loose, shadow stretching, confident, unaware that the next move would not be dictated by fear or command, but by the delicate negotiation of instinct and trust that had taken weeks to build. The wind carried a mixture of scents, rain, earth, the approaching storm, the distant ridge, and the presence of humans waiting, watching. The wild horse's muscles rippled, coiled like springs, every nerve alive, yet he held, suspended, aware of the farmer's calm presence, the invisible tether of patience, the silent promise that had kept him from fleeing. The tension was electric, unrelenting, every moment stretching into eternity, every breath carrying the potential for chaos or breakthrough. The trader stepped closer, confidence radiating, rope swinging, ready to claim, unaware of the fragile, invisible bond holding the horse in place. The townsfolk leaned forward, eyes wide, breaths held, some gripping fences, some pressing palms to faces, hearts pounding. The storm clouds above rumbled, wind gusted, and the field seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Every creature, human and animal alike, holding in suspended tension. The wild horse pawed once more, nostrils flaring, tail flicking sharply, eyes darting, ears flattened, muscles rippling with coiled strength. His instincts screamed flight, yet the memory of patience, of care, of steady presence held him suspended. The farmer spoke again, low and steady, hand near the fence, offering reassurance without command. Calm. It's all right. Nothing to fear. Every heartbeat stretched into eternity. Every movement, every breath, every glance carried the weight of possibility. The climax of the story hovered, just out of reach, every participant horse, farmer, trader, townsfolk, and even the wind and grass suspended in the tension of the impossible moment before transformation.